Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are unpacking one of the most wild and truly consequential macroeconomic stories of the modern era. We're tracking Japan's massive transition from a seemingly invincible economic juggernaut right into a cautionary tale of long-term stagnation. It's a giant historical puzzle, so let's just jump right in. To set the stage, just think about this. In the 1980s, Japan was set to conquer the world. Its real estate values were astronomical. Then, the bubble burst, and the country entered a lost era it's still navigating. The sheer contrast between that pure 1980s euphoria and the sobering reality they've been dealing with ever since, it's just absolutely staggering. So, to understand exactly how this happened, here is our roadmap for today. 1. The 1980s asset bubble. 2. The dramatic collapse. 3. The balance sheet recession. 4. The demographic challenge. And 5. Lessons for the world. Let's get to it. Part 1. The 1980s asset bubble, or the illusion of growth. You really have to look at monetary policy to see how they accidentally poured gasoline on this fire. Back in 1985, the Plaza Accord forced a massive appreciation of the Japanese yen. So, to protect their export machine, the Bank of Japan aggressively slashed interest rates in '86. And man, that flood of cheap money was the spark. By 1987, you had this unprecedented massive asset bubble blowing up in both stocks and real estate. Realizing things were getting insanely overheated, the central bank had to aggressively hike rates in '89 to try and pop it. But the resulting fallout was so uniquely severe that by 1999, Japan actually had to pioneer a zero-interest rate policy just to keep the economy on life support. But it wasn't just the cheap money itself, right? It was how that money was being directed. Under a policy known as window guidance, the central bank was essentially dictating loan quotas to commercial banks. So the banks just relentlessly expanded their lending, heavily backed by real estate. And because regulations let them count unrealized stock gains as capital, rising stocks meant they could lend even more money, which just bid up property and stocks even further. Add in this deep cultural belief in Japan Inc., where everyone thought the good times would literally never end, and you've got a perfectly elegant but entirely dangerous speculative doom loop. Part 2. The dramatic collapse, when the bubble finally bursts. When the central bank slammed on the brakes in 1989, the euphoria just shattered. I mean, think about the absolute disconnect for reality at the peak. In 1989, the theoretical value of just the land beneath Tokyo's Imperial Palace was worth more than all the real estate in the entire state of California. Literally hallucinatory valuations. But when those rates went up, the illusion vanished overnight. By 1992, the post-crash reality was brutal. Stock prices plummeted by 60%. Commercial land dropped by 50%. The laws of economic gravity, well, they came back with a total vengeance. Just take a second to process this number. 1,500 trillion yen. That is the estimated amount of wealth just totally wiped out by the collapse in land and stock prices. To put that completely mind-boggling figure into perspective, that was equivalent to 3 whole years of Japan's total GDP at the time, an absolute wealth destruction event of historic proportions that completely wrecked corporate and household balance sheets. Part 3, the balance sheet recession, a massive structural shift. So a lot of people wonder, why didn't the Japanese economy just bounce back eventually? The answer lies in a fascinating framework by economist Richard Koo, which he calls the balance sheet recession. See, when asset prices completely tanked, Japanese corporations suddenly found themselves technically insolvent. Their liabilities vastly outweighed their crushed asset values, even though many were still churning out operational profits. So to survive, they fundamentally shifted their behavior. Instead of trying to maximize profits and grow, their one and only goal became debt minimization. They funneled all their cash into paying down debt, and they absolutely refused to borrow new money, even when interest rates were slashed to zero. This process is known as deleveraging. Now, paying down debt, that's usually a responsible, prudent thing for a single household or a business to do. But imagine what happens when every major corporation in an entire economy does it at the exact same time. It creates this massive sucking drag on aggregate demand. Corporate investment just fell off a cliff. And with the private sector completely obsessed with debt repayment instead of investing in growth, traditional monetary policy basically became useless. And this naturally morphed into an even deeper structural trap, the zombie doom loop. It went like this. First, asset prices crashed. Second, instead of just taking the hit, banks tried to hide their massive losses, hoping the market would magically bounce back. Third, to prevent these bad loans from defaulting, banks actually kept lending new money to technically insolvent companies, these so-called zombie firms, literally just to keep them on life support. And finally, this completely stifled any real economic recovery. Capital was trapped in dying businesses instead of flowing to innovative new ones that could actually grow the economy. This totally toxic environment then birthed another monster: chronic deflation. Deflation is a persistent downward spiral in the general price level. Now, cheaper goods might sound great on paper, but in a highly indebted economy, it is an absolute nightmare. Deflation actually increases the real burden of your debt because the money you're paying back is worth more than the money you originally borrowed. Plus, if consumers know a car or a fridge will be cheaper tomorrow, they just delay buying it today. That suppresses demand even further and really entrenches the stagnation. Part 4. The demographic challenge and aging population. As if the financial unraveling wasn't hard enough to manage, Japan was simultaneously dealing with a huge, fundamental shift in its demographics. Research confirms Japan is the fastest aging advanced economy in the world, and demographics deeply impact the real macroeconomic picture. As populations age, households naturally start saving more for longer retirements, and they spend a lot less. That age-specific preference for safety naturally shifts capital away from productive risk-taking investments, which just further suppresses economic vitality. To really grasp the sheer scale of this demographic headwind, check out the old age dependency ratio. That's the number of citizens over 65 relative to the working age population. Back in 1990, right as the bubble burst, it was sitting at around 10%. Pretty manageable. By 2020, it surged to roughly 48%, and by the early 2050s, it's projected to hit a staggering 80%. That means a rapidly shrinking workforce is going to be forced to carry this immense, constantly growing burden of pension, medical, and long-term care costs. And we aren't just talking about aging, the total population is physically shrinking. Japan's population is projected to drop from roughly 124 million in 2023 down to about 106 million by 2044. On a macro level, a shrinking labor force and an aging population inherently suppress long-term GDP growth. But crucially, it also drives down the natural rate of interest, the neutral interest rate that neither stimulates nor restricts the economy. And when that rate drops, it makes it incredibly difficult for the central bank to use traditional rate cuts to actually boost growth. Part 5. Lessons for the World: Pioneering Policy Tools. So, to survive this incredibly brutal combination of a balance sheet recession, entrenched deflation, and a shrinking population, Japan essentially had to pioneer policy tools that the rest of the world would eventually adopt decades later. Because the private sector completely stopped borrowing, the government literally had to step in as the spender of last resort. The Bank of Japan implemented a zero interest rate policy by 1999 and effectively invented modern quantitative easing in 2001. The government pumped out over 100 trillion yen in the 1990s alone just on infrastructure stimulus. And by 2003, they finally set up the Industrial Revitalization Corporation to force the painful restructuring of those toxic zombie loans. But keeping the ship afloat came at an astronomical cost. Because the government had to relentlessly borrow and spend just to offset the massive private sector deleveraging, Japan's gross public debt just went vertical. Today, it stands well past 250% of GDP. That is by far the highest debt burden among all advanced economies. It is the ultimate, lingering legacy of having to plug a 1.5 quadrillion yen hole in the economy, all while simultaneously managing the escalating costs of a rapidly aging society. Which leaves us with a really critical question as we look around the globe today at other nations facing their own asset bubbles, heavy debt loads, and aging demographics. Do you think Japan's economic lessons are relevant for other aging economies today? Share your thoughts on this complex challenge. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.